Yay. All right. Today is Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. It is 10 a.m. on all 3 clocks, which makes me super happy. And we're going to call this meeting of the Board of Commissioners to order. We have all 3 commissioners here, so we do have a full quorum. First up today is recognition, and we are recognizing our employees. So I think Miss Yule has the pins and the certificates, and she'll hand them out as I call your name. So first up is Casey Miller with 15 years of service.
Get up there too.
Get up, yes.
Now you get to stand up there awkwardly.
Yeah, you get to stand up awkwardly. All right, next we have Diane Killian with the clerk's office, 10 years of service. Next, we have Zeth Allen, community justice, 5 years of service. Then Kelly Besterfield with Health and Human Services, 5 years of service. And Yvonne McEwen, HHS, 5 years of service. All right, we're going to grab a photo. No, she's just collecting for somebody. Oh, yeah. Okie dokie. Thank you. All right, and next we have introduction of our new county employees, and I don't see them here yet. Maybe they're a little early. I think Jaylene's online, so I don't know if she's doing that.
No, they should be joining. I'm guessing they're running a little bit behind schedule.
Okay, we'll just come back to them. That's fine. All right, so next up, we're going to move to proclamation for Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month. Commissioner Hall, do you want to read the proclamation?
I'd be honored.
Have Paul come up as Commissioner Hall is doing that.
In the matter of proclaiming April 2023 as Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month in Lincoln County. Whereas child abuse and neglect is a serious problem affecting every segment of our community, and finding solutions requires input and action from everyone. And whereas our children are our most valuable resources and will shape the future of Lincoln County. And whereas child abuse can have long-term psychological, emotional, and physical effects that have lasting consequences for victims of abuse. And whereas the incidence of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse of children, as well as neglect of children, continues at an alarming level. And whereas it is essential that every citizen in Lincoln County become involved in supporting the efforts of parents and guardians to raise their children in a safe, nurturing environment. Whereas we acknowledge that we must work together to increase awareness about child abuse and contribute to promoting the social and emotional well-being of children and families in a safe, stable, and nurturing environment. And now, therefore, we, the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners, do hereby proclaim April 2023 as Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month in Lincoln County, and encourage all citizens to work together to help reduce child abuse and neglect significantly in the years to come, starting with joining in this observance.
Thank you so much. All
You're
right,
welcome.
if you want to please introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. I'm Paul Schrader, the executive director of the Children's Advocacy Center. And on my right here is Shannon Ingersoll. She is our new prevention coordinator.
Is there anything else you want to share with us or talk about the Children's Advocacy Center? Or?
Yeah, well, I would love to just share that the Children's Advocacy Center takes a holistic approach to the child abuse problem. We perform intervention services, forensic interviews, forensic medical exams, prevention services that Shannon will be doing in terms of the Darkness to Light training, and then also trauma therapy treatment services as well. And we serve all of Lincoln County with these services, and we're honored to do so.
Thank you, Shannon. Anything you wanted to add, or maybe I have taken Darkness to Light. I don't know if other people in this room have. Maybe you could share a little bit about when that next training might be.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. So Darkness to Light has a new updated version, and it's updated to include more diversity with not only individuals who are producing this course, but also in the victims and in the families that we serve. Additionally, the stats are updated as well up through 2021. COVID's kind of skewed those a bit, as I'm sure you can understand. But it's also trauma informed, recognizing what taking this course might be for those who are taking it as well. So it's really encompassing that holistic approach that we also promote over at the center. And I do want to say one more thing, which is I want you to know how appreciative I am as somebody who has spent years working with children who are abuse and child abuse victims. As a survivor myself of child abuse, it's not just a proclamation you're making. It's not just a signature. It is a commitment. And for those of us who do have the lifelong suffering, your power and your influence speaks volumes. So thank you for taking this time. I know we do it, but I just need you to know how important that is. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would just encourage everybody to take Darkness to Light. It's been many years since I have taken it. I've been a foster parent for about 15 years in this community and took it many years ago, but I think it's important for everybody, whether you're a parent, whether you're a community member, advocate, et cetera. I think it's just important for everybody to take that training at some point. So yes.
Madam Chair, yeah, I took that training several years ago and it's enlightening, eye-opening, and I think really, as you've said, of value to everyone. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Let's
yeah.
see. I believe the center opened around 1990. Am I, do you know?
97 is when we opened our doors.
97.
Yeah,
Okay.
93 is when they became a nonprofit.
Okay. And how long have you been executive director, Paul?
6.5 years now.
Oh, wow. So a very broad, open-ended question, but do you think we're moving the needle, the collective we, CAC, law enforcement, education, and are we moving it far enough, fast enough?
I think that's a great question. And I'll take the second part first, which is no, it's never far enough, fast enough. But the first part is very encouraging. I can tell you that statistically, we are doing better in Lincoln County in terms of abuse rates. And I think that is it's a modest improvement, but because so many things were happening and it was worse in many situations, in many cases throughout COVID, I think that's a real market success there. And in terms of the prevention aspect, we've worked with CPAN, the Center for Prevention of Abuse and Neglect out of the University of Oregon for I think probably the life of the Darkness to Light program in the state of Oregon. And that group is wonderful and has spent a lot of time and energy and effort in really assessing that statistically and with great accuracy. And the answer is that we are definitely improving the prevention aspect as well. Dramatically.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, Madam Chair, question. The Darkness to Light training, if you could summarize, what you take away from that training. Are there major themes you could share with us that
Yes,
worth
definitely.
considering?
And I'd be happy to. I'm going to give you just a little bit of my background so that I can tell you what my feelings are about Darkness to Light. So I spent 5 years as an assistant professor, both at Arizona State and Illinois State. And I was in charge of the College of Ed and the Graduate College of Ed, specifically using process, drama, and theater for social change as a way to promote inclusivity with everybody. From there, it felt like it wasn't enough. So I worked in the school district specifically with marginalized, what we would call marginalized and at-risk youth. And clearly I've had copious amounts of education. Hands down, the single best training I have ever taken is Darkness to Light, which is why I reached out again to the CAC, because it needs to be here. Some of the takeaways other than statistics is you will get practical, hands-on, step-by-step ways to identify, what's going on, how to step in, how to help to educate others, very simple things. As well, such as please teach children the correct body part terms. Very simple things like that. And it is evidence-based. So the work that they have done with this provides those stats, and it shows just how much implementation of a prevention program does work. It is, I'm telling you, hands down the best. You'll get takeaways, you'll participate in things. It's not role play, don't worry. But it is all inclusive and it has shown to work.
Yeah. And what's the time commitment like for the training?
It is a 2.5-hour training, and it usually lasts about 2 years with your certification. And we're currently reaching out to different audiences to actively recruit them to see if they would like to partner with us in something that's more sustainable. So instead of just, every now and again, is that person, do they need to be recertified? We will keep them on a sustainable calendar to make sure that we reach that out to them. I mean, 2.5 hours. A lot of times people come to me and you hear it all the time. If I could just change the life of one person in my lifetime,
Mhm.
2.5 hours, and you can absolutely reach more than one. in my opinion.
So as a victim of abuse myself, it's something that really occurred to me later, I think in my 20s. I don't know if it was just repressed, but for individuals who may be in a similar situation where one day you think to yourself, oh my gosh, this happened. What are your recommendations for people later in life to kind of come to terms with what they've been through? Any thoughts?
That's a great question as well. So 52 years of age is the average that an individual who has suffered child sexual abuse,
Mm,
that's how long it takes for the majority to come out and say, this is what
Wow.
happened to me. It's well over 800,000, closest to 1 million in what it costs in order to care for known and unknown cases. That's in healthcare. That might be in an employee being hired, then having panic attacks and having to leave and then come back, the embarrassment that you share with that. So the first thing I would suggest is if there's not somebody close to reach out to, then it's always best, in my opinion, and I know Darkness to Light shares it too, is to reach out to professionals who know how to deal with that. Much like anything, I think open communication and honesty is also very important, but clearly you need to build trust and learn boundaries with that. So reaching out to somebody, definitely getting some professional help works as well. But if we bring it to light, right? If we don't keep it in the darkness and we bring it to light, we could normalize a situation that should never be normalized, but that will in fact help prevent this as well.
Yeah. Well, appreciate the work that you're doing and let us know, how we can support you.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
You'll all get invitations to the next training.
Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a refresher would be good.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm always looking for my 200 training hours as a foster family. So thank you for that. All right. Does someone want to make a motion?
Yeah, I would move that we proclaim April 2023 as Child Abuse Awareness and Prevention Month in Lincoln County.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye,
All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
for
all.
being here.
thanks.
All right, and it looks like our new employees are here. So we're going to go back up
There they
to
are.
the agenda under recognition and proclamation to introduction of new employees.
Excellent.
So I think everyone's going to get up. Yeah.
Jesus. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Morning. For the record, my name is Tiana Alcadair, Human Resources Assistant with Lincoln County. I am introducing our new hires for the month of March. The only person not joining us in person is Jane Hoffman. She's a contract employee with the Sheriff's Office.
Excellent.
All right, so now everyone can come up to the microphone and just state your name and the position and department you're in.
My name is Jesus Landa and I'm working as a legal assistant in the district attorney's office for Lincoln County.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Hi, Shelley Kleinschmidt, Public Informations Officer in Health and Human Services.
Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Meg Hawes. I'm a legal assistant in the district attorney's office.
Hello, I'm John Warder. I'm with Transit as a driver.
Yay.
Thank you.
You're not gonna introduce yourself, Molly, even though you've been here like 6 years.
Me too.
More the merrier. Why not?
I know. Why not? I'm Molly Murphy, Field Supervisor for Transit, and I've been here for 6 years, but I never did the tour, so I wanted to join after 6 years. I heard so much about the tour, and wanted to meet you all, so.
Thank you, Molly.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Molly.
All right, thanks, everybody. Right, moving on to adoption of the consent calendar. These are items of a routine nature, but either staff or commissioners can pull for further information or discussion. I will just note now that we've moved to a first and third Wednesday for meetings, our consent calendar has kind of exploded here.
Yeah.
So
It's
lots,
deep.
yeah, it's getting deep, lots going on there, but any information or items that commissioners or staff needs to pull or discuss further?
Not for me, thank you.
Okay,
Not for me.
all right, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt today's consent calendar as presented.
I will second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. Thanks. Next, we're gonna move on to public hearing. This is a fiscal year 2022-2023 Health and Human Services Budget Adjustment presented by Jane Romero, our HHS Director, and Marie Lapper, HHS Behavioral Health Director. Come forward, please. Good morning.
Good morning.
Aye.
For the record, Jane Romero, HHS Director.
And Christina Scheer, Finance Director.
We have
Hi.
not actually coordinated how we're doing this.
I think I'll go ahead and start real quick. As you know, we do budget adjustments periodically from time to time throughout the year. As we discussed at our last meeting, some of those adjustments by statute are required to have public hearings and require a different level of notification and documentation. I will state that this is an HHS centric budget adjustment. We do try and group things into logical groups. And so this is HHS's array of budget adjustments as of today. This will not be the last budget adjustment you see this year. We're hoping to get them on a quarterly schedule moving forward, but you're still going to see more. There is nothing particularly unusual or noteworthy. A lot of this stuff is timing based. Budgeting is all about timing. When do you get a grant? When do you know about a grant? Did you spend out the grant you got last year the way you thought were, or did you carry it forward? So a lot of these budget adjustments really have more to do with timing than anything else. So I'll just preface that and open it up for questions.
Well, and also I do want to add that usually when we submit our budgets in any given year, we don't actually have our contracts from for example, from the Oregon Health Authority. So we take those budgets forward with estimates based on whatever the current year level of funding is. And so I think that starts to be kind of central to some of the adjustments that we see. The other thing though is, and I do want to highlight, the real reason that we need to have this hearing is because the mental health budget has increased by over $5.6 million. And a good bit of that funding is tied to new revenue that we received. $2.5 million to develop housing for the mental health, for folks in our mental health system, as well as about $1.1 million for funding that we got to implement the behavioral health resource network services that the county is responsible for. And there's some other small pots of money in there, but the total is $5.6 million, $44,454 There are some other adjustments for the other three divisions, but they do not actually reach the 10% threshold that require the public hearing.
Right, thank you. Any questions from either of you?
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
On the first page of your memo, Jane, it mentions 500,000 for an aid and assist grant, which will be utilized to stand up a crisis facility on Avery Street. And, aid and assist is something that seems to be an ongoing problem for Oregon. And, but can you talk a little bit more about this planned facility and how it fits into the larger picture?
So we acquired a property on Avery Street, and our intent is to open a crisis stabilization program there. And we basically would not have people living there, staying there. It would be a 24-hour crisis stabilization house. Basically, we would have recliners and a place where folks could, basically come to that's safe, where we could assess them, work with them, support them. We also intend to base our crisis response team out of this house. I think you are probably aware of the fact that there's a mandate that we operate 24/7, two-person crisis response team. I think this is sort of the new law of the land, and certainly it's true here in Oregon as well. And so this becomes a place where we think we would like to gather our staff so that they could launch from there. But it's still a work in progress, still a lot of program design activity and discussion going forward.
Do you have an expected or projected opening date?
I do not, but I would suggest it would be around September,
Of this year?
Of this year. In
Okay.
the mental health arena, we have serious staffing challenges, as we all know. And so our ability to bring staffing to this is, just really challenging. So the funding is there to support us, and it comes from different pots of money. But we're, working with the Oregon Health Authority to explore options, even using counselors via like a telehealth relationship when we launch, and, just trying to figure out a configuration that'll work for us here on the coast.
Great. One more question, if I could. It mentions 1,196,013 awarded to fund a harm reduction program in public health, and we've had harm reduction for several years. So is this new funding source for the existing program, or or growing the existing program? Or?
It was able to replace funding that exhausted and also expand the program. And then we also are using this funding to continue our medication assisted treatment program, which we call our OBAP program, the office-based addiction treatment. We started that program with money that we got from HRSA. That funding exhausted actually in December of last year. And so this funding actually enables us to continue it.
Great.
Thank you. All right, I have a procedural question, Ms. Yule. This is listed under a public hearing. So do I need to open public hearing? You should. Okay, great. I'm going to open the public hearing for the fiscal year 2022-2023 HHS budget adjustment. Do we have anybody in the audience that would like to give testimony in regard to this specific public hearing and the budget adjustments for HHS? Do not see anybody. All right, is there anyone online? If there is, please raise your virtual hand in regards again to the HHS budget adjustment. I do not see anybody there. Do we need to keep the budget hearing open for the following week? Nope. Okay. So we can go ahead and close the public hearing for the HHS budget adjustment. And then bring this back the following week for adoption. Okay, I think we'll bring this back the following week.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do we need to put this on decision action, or can we put it under consent?
I'm fine with
Consent.
consent.
Fine with that as
Okay.
well. Thank you.
Back on consent. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we're moving to decision and action, Lincoln County Administrative Policy and Procedure. This is discussing bilingual pay updates, and I believe Jaylene Cook, our Assistant HR Director, who is online, is going to present this to us.
Yes, thank you for your time today, commissioners. My name is Jaylene Cook, and I am the Assistant HR Director.
Hang on just a minute, Jaylene. Can you turn her up just a little bit?
There you go.
Okay, try again, Jaylene.
Can you hear me better?
Much better.
Oh, good. All right. Well, thank you for having me. Again, for the record, my name is Jaylene Cook, and I am the Assistant HR Director. Sorry, I'm not able to join in person, but I'm fighting a cold, and I didn't think you'd want my germs there. We are bringing back the recently revised policy for bilingual pay. Our underrepresented employees went to leadership and the equity coordinator with some concerns on the policy that we had drafted and approved. Unfortunately, we hoped that, that this policy would help provide guidance and support for those folks, as we didn't have one in place, but it was actually negatively impacting those underrepresented employees. So David Collier, the HR director, myself with HHS leadership and that equity coordinator, were able to sit down and make some changes together on our current policy that we have. Would you guys like me to go through and highlight some of those changes and clarify that information for you?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that would be
Please
handy.
highlight
Great.
those.
All right, so on the first page, the definitions, what we did here is we just moved our certified medical interpreter down. That way there was consistency throughout the document, because we kind of went back and forth in that order. So it's really just to clean that up a little bit. On page 2, you'll notice that we removed some language on A2 and A3. So our bilingual staff were consistently being pulled in other directions outside of the scope of their work. On this 2 in particular, it stated that individuals were supposed to ask department leadership prior to asking bilingual staff to, translate for them. And unfortunately, that was not happening. So our bilingual staff were placed in an awkward position, oftentimes unable to say no to that request, and doing things outside of their work, which made it more challenging for them to complete the work that they are assigned to. And number 3, we removed the human resources will maintain a list. We did move that elsewhere in the document, but we did strike the language that it would be available to other departments, just to help reduce the likelihood that people are going to these bilingual employees and asking them to translate when they have their own work to do. We included ma'am as another language in addition to Spanish and American Sign Language, because that is definitely needed in the community that we have here. And then continuing to page 4, again, this was a cleanup, just like the definition section. What we were doing here is we were just moving language up so it's in the same order as those definitions. So then on page 6, you'll notice that we made some adjustments to the amount of the flat rate compensation for the bilingual designation. So the amount that we had selected before was a bit more arbitrary. What we had done is we'd reached out to our comparable counties and asked them what they do for that language stipend, and based it off of similar counties and what they were paying. These new rates, what we really wanted to do was reflect the different levels and different requirements that come with those designations. So in those meetings with HHS leadership and the equity coordinator, what we decided to do was have more concrete percentage differences between those. So you'll notice about roughly a 25% increase from our proficiency based to our position based. And then from that position base to the QMI, you'll see closer to 50%. And the reason for that is additional testing and certification that's more intensive than those position-based ones. And from QMI to the CMI, we go back to that 25% difference. And again, that was just to provide more consistency and reflect those additional certification and steps that staff have to take to reach those levels. And on page 7, on the administration, you notice that we had, right above the administration, you notice we had a typo. It was $22 for the first and second pay period of each month for an additional language. So say someone is bilingual in Spanish, but then they also have no American Sign Language, that should be $25 for that second language. So we were just amending that. In administration, that's where we added that HR is going to keep a list of those individuals that have the bilingual pay. Again, that list will not be available to other departments in the county, but it's for us to maintain for our records as well as be able to provide that bilingual pay to them. And then the rest of the document are our forms that we had created for the bilingual differential pay and designation. So we just cleaned up those forms to match the policy revisions that we made, and just we took one out completely that wasn't going to work with those policy changes and revise it to make sure it had those designations and with the proper amounts in there. Any questions on that, commissioners?
None for me.
No.
Nope.
Yeah, no questions. Just good to see it getting dialed in, and the inclusion of ma'am is great.
Mhm.
So,
Yep, absolutely.
Yes, and I think it was great that those underrepresented individuals felt comfortable going to leadership and the equity coordinator to express those concerns. So that way we could sit down and work together to create a policy that was more inclusive.
Glad to hear that.
Mhm.
awesome. Thank you.
All right, we do have this under decision action, but I think this is the first time we've heard of this, so do we want to bring this back under consent maybe next time, or is there?
I'm fine with that unless there's some kind of urgency that we need to act today. But I'm assuming there isn't.
No.
Okay,
Okay, yeah.
then let's bring it back
Yeah.
next meeting.
Yeah, then it will be under consent at the next meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay, moving on to
Thank you,
reports.
Jalen.
County assessment. Yeah, thank you, Jaylene.
welcome.
County assessment function funding, county assessment function funding assistant grant.
That just trips right up the tongue, doesn't it?
3 times, Katie.
Presented by Joe Davidson, our county assessor. Welcome.
Thank you for
Hi,
saying
Joe.
that, so I didn't have to.
Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Joe Davidson, County Assessor. As Commissioner Jacobson just said, this is a application for the county's participation in the 2023-24 CAFA program. So CAFA stands for, again, County Assessment Function Funding Assistance. This is an annual grant program that was established in the Oregon Legislature in 1989 through House Bill 2338. The goal at the time was to provide additional support for assessment and tax functions at the county level over and above the general fund dollars, and provide at least a level of statewide uniformity in the property tax administration of the property tax system. And so the way it works, there's actually 2 funding mechanisms, both at the county level, one recording fees and one delinquent interest on uncollected property taxes. And so on the recording side, every time a real estate transaction, like a deed or a title, is recorded in the county clerk's office, $9 goes into CAFA. On the delinquent interest side, as you know, property tax statements are sent out late October with an initial due date of November 15th. You can pay everything and get a 3% discount. You can pay 2/3 and receive a 2% discount, or you can pay in 3 installments, being in November, February, and May. However, if you don't pay anything or pay under the minimum, those taxes become delinquent and interest starts to accrue in the amount of 1 1/3% per month, or 16% annually. A portion, actually 25% of that interest, which is considered tier 1 interest, goes into CAFA. And then an additional 25% of the interest that would otherwise go to non-county and non-K through 12 school districts, considered 2-tier interest, also goes in, tier 2 interest also goes into CAFA. And so that's the standard. However, the Department of Revenue each year before the fiscal year forecasts what those percentages will generate. And if it's expected to generate less than $13 million in revenue statewide, they can actually adjust that tier 1 interest above 25%. And so this last year, it was actually adjusted up to 30%. And this next year, it's expected to, we got a preliminary forecast yesterday. It's expected to be adjusted up to 32.25% to generate that $13 million. And so that's the basic funding mechanism behind CAFA. As you can imagine, neither of those are very stable. They're not indexed. They're actually somewhat opposing depending on the real estate market and the economy. And so they tend to offset one another. And so the if you look at the history of CAPA funding, it's pretty much straight across the board, whereas our expenses continue to go up each year. And I've got a little graph to kind of illustrate that a little bit later on, but just to backtrack a little bit. So those amounts are deposited into a local county assessment and tax fund from the recording fees and delinquent interest. It builds interest, and then that fund is deposited into a statewide CAFA fund administered by the Department of Revenue on a monthly basis. Continues to grow interest. Department of Revenue takes 10% off the top for their own A&T functions, as they're responsible for appraising some of the higher dollar industrial properties and centrally assessed utility properties. And they also advise the counties. And so they take 10% for those services, and the remaining balance is distributed back to the counties based on how much they're filing and expenses through this application. And so, as you can imagine, the amount we're distributing into the account and the amount we're getting back is not the same. It's all dependent on what's going on in our county for this revenue and how much we're filing in expenses compared to other counties. So we all get a slice of the pie, but it varies depending on the expenses that we're filing. And I've got a chart to kind of illustrate that relationship too. But first, I don't know if I guess we don't have this up on the screen.
We have it in our packet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first page in the application, this is directly from the application itself. First page covers staffing. And so, as you can see, this goes beyond just the assessor's office and the tax collector's office. There's also a portion of FTE claimed for the Board of Property Tax Appeals. It's administered in the county clerk's office. And FTE for GIS administration, that's from the surveyor's office, as we rely on GIS. And they also provide control points for our assessor tax maps to make them more accurate. And so the surveyor's office claims some expenses here too. And then finally, our IT department, we rely on them obviously continuously throughout the year for our automated systems. Most importantly, if you look at column 1, last year's FTE and column 2, they're exactly the same. We're not claiming anything more. We're not requesting anything more this year. The second page are basically the expenses tied to each of those same functions. It's kind of organized in a grid at the top: personnel services, materials and services, and transportation for each of those 6 different functions. These are just adjusted basically for cost of living, inflation, but there's nothing additional being requested this year. The other thing you might notice is the indirect cost percentage, 18.67%. That's calculated each year by your finance department. And so that's taken a little bit of an increase this last year. It's basically just the overall expenses for support functions in the county divided by the total expenses. So if you look at this page, and then the next section contains the same exact 2 pages from last year's application, so you can compare the two. So that indirect cost, you can see, went from 15.8 last year to 18 something this year. But again, that's just all based on that ratio of support services to total services. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of the history here. The first page of this next section really displays what I was just talking about, the expenses for A&T. Broken down by department. You can see the bottom, the red section is at indirect cost. The purple portion of this histogram, the bar in the histogram, represents assessment. So it's valuation, levy, and cartography. And then the green portion represents the tax office, tax collection side. Orange is IT, and the little blue section is our Board of Property Tax Appeals. So you can kind of see how that's kind of just grown over time. There are a little bit of fluctuations, a little bit of a fluctuation in 2008 to 2009 due to a couple of layoffs, a couple more fluctuations beyond that just due to retirements. The next several pages are just data behind that histogram I just showed, so we can just go beyond that, but I wanted to include that detail. You jump to the next histogram. This is very interesting. So it shows the relationship of our grant funding each year, which is the red bar. You guys caught up here?
Orange bar.
Red, orange,
Red,
yeah,
grant
orange.
funds
We'll go with
received.
orange.
I'm with you.
So that's the grant funds we've received each year, back to basically a couple decades. And the blue bar is our total expenses filed for CAFA. If you look at basically starting in 2001-2, there's a major spike. I'm sorry, the green bar represents the percentage of grant funds to expenses. So if you look at that spike in the green line, starting in 01-02, so that was the beginning of a special payments that the legislature approved in the amount of $2.5 million. They were kicking into CAFA annually. However, that got phased out in 08-09 due to the I guess revenue shortfalls in the state budget. So they phased that out. It had a direct impact on CAFA funding. And then over time, there are a couple of spikes in here. That's the most recent spike in 1920 in the green line. That was almost exclusively due to recording fees due to refinance activity. And so due to historically low rates at that time, a lot of people were refinancing their homes, their mortgages, and we saw a massive spike in recording fees because of that. However, with interest rates increasing, that tapered off the following year. And as you can see, we're at an all-time low. Significant decreases here, even more than Department of Revenue was anticipating last year's forecast, because we not only took a drop with the high interest rates in recording fees, but we also, for whatever reason, they still can't explain it. They're still trying to study the reason why uncollected property taxes also went down. They usually are offset by one another. But overall, we took close to a 30% decrease in CAFA funding. Went from 20.1 million last year overall statewide to below 15 million this year. So that obviously has a direct impact when you look at this relationship of fund dollars, grant fund dollars to our expenses. 375,000 this year is an estimate. That's just based on what we received in Q1 and Q2 of 22-23, projected out based on what the Department of Revenue is expecting. And we just carried that over to next year. One, I guess, glimmer of hope, if you want to call it that, is that the Department of Revenue is projecting that this is kind of a bottoming out of this trend with at least the CAFA dollars, and they're expecting a little bit of an increase in recordings this next year. So any questions on that graph? Okay. And then again, the following pages are just data behind that one. If you jump to the next chart. So this is specific to Lincoln County. What we are depositing into CAFA each year based on the revenue generated from recording fees and delinquent interest, and what we're receiving back. So the red bar is what we receive back, the blue bar is what we're depositing. So you can see during that same time frame when the state was kicking in that 2.5 million, basically 01 through 08, we were actually receiving more money back than we were kicking in. But once that was phased out, the trend has just gotten more and more to the point where we're more and more of a donor county to this
So Joe,
program.
can you say that one more time? The red bar is what we expect to receive or what we kick out?
The red bar is what we're receiving from CAFA each year. The blue bar is what the revenue we're generating and putting into the statewide CAFA fund. So you can see the blue. Yeah, the blue is very much outweighing the red. We're take 21-22, for instance. I think that's about the most extreme case. Sorry, 2021. We kicked in $1.5 million to the state CAFA fund, and we received back $480,000. So we subsidized other counties by almost $1 million that year. That's kind of the idea behind this program, is statewide uniformity.
Mhm.
It's really helping out the counties that are struggling with their general funds. However, because we're such a small active county with not a lot of expenses relative to other counties, we're seeing this relationship here. We generate a lot of revenue due to a lot of real estate activity going on in the county. But relative to other counties, our expenses for A&T budgets are not as much as you might see. And so that's really what this is displaying.
Mhm.
And then the last page is the data behind that Jane Welch, our treasurer, provided, and we just put it into a chart form. But so a couple of things currently in this legislative cycle. Our association, Osaka Association of County Assessors, have done a really good job in the last few years educating the legislature about what I just presented to you, and educating them on the importance of A&T funding. And so there's actually two bills on the table this year. The chair of the House Revenue Committee, Nancy Nathanson, has drafted a concept to take 3% off of all property tax collections and put them directly into CAFA. So I did a rough estimate. That would be about 4.2 million for Lincoln County, which would be more than our A&T budget total. I don't know if that's going to pass. It's getting a lot of opposition, especially from the League of Oregon Cities, because that's a direct impact to their revenue from property tax dollars. It is getting support from the counties for the most part. And so we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll get a trimmed down version of that. 1% would be great, you know.
Yeah.
At least it's indexed. If it's related to property taxes, it's indexed each year with that Measure 50 increase. Another concept directs the Legislative Revenue Office. Oh, sorry, that last one was House Bill 2088, the 3%. And again, that came from Representative Nathanson, who's the chair of the House Revenue Committee. That's been through a public hearing already, and it's slated to have a stakeholders meeting this Thursday. And we've got representation from our association there. And then House Bill 3386 directs the Legislative Revenue Office to study additional funding sources for CAFA. And establish more of like a state incentive program for grant matching. If we wanted to do system upgrades or improve efficiencies, there would be more like an application process, and they'd set up some incentive programs for that. So those are the two on the table right now. Again, the Department of Revenue just sent a forecast yesterday showing that they're estimating CAFA to increase 11.6% next year versus this year. So again, they're seeing more of a bottoming out this year. So I guess where we're at now is, you know, this is a decision, or sorry, a discussion item this week. This application is due to the Department of Revenue on May 1st. And so I'm here to answer any questions with the hope that this can be approved next meeting, so we can meet that deadline.
Any questions?
Yeah, just a quick question, Joe, about
Yeah.
Board of Property Tax Appeals. Does that trend against any of these numbers in any significant way that you've seen over the years?
The expenses for Board of Property Tax
Yeah.
Appeals.
Yeah.
It seems to, if we go back to that section, I think the Board of Property Tax Appeals is claiming a half of an FTE for that service. But I don't,
But overall, that works, okay?
yeah, I mean, we rely, when we're doing this application, we actually reach out to the other departments to provide this data
Moving.
to us for this
Oh, no, those are increased.
application. I can tell you that the number of appeals
Dropping those.
has dropped significantly in the last 5-6 years. We used
Yeah.
to be up in the several hundreds, and we were down to the 20s. This last year, I think we were back up to about 42 this year.
Okay.
And so a significant difference. However, the process, the administration of the appeals is very similar regardless of the numbers that you have. They still have to set up, and recently they've kind of transitioned to a virtual or hybrid platform, which has been really convenient for the property owners that are appealing their value.
Helps that process
Right.
smoother.
It does,
Mm,
yeah,
Good.
especially for people that might live out of the state. You know, they can still chime in to that process. But my office, we've done, the reason for that reduction, I guess, in the number of appeals, we've been making a strong effort to reach out to property owners when they call after tax statements go out with valuation disputes. A lot of times it just takes a conversation to really understand what's going on with assessed value versus market value. It can be very confusing. And so a lot of times just a discussion is all it takes.
Mm.
Sometimes there are errors, or sometimes our appraisers, they might agree, yes, maybe this could be classed a little bit different and reduce the value. But it has really helped in the formal appeals that are being filed, just that kind of informal discussion process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
Questions, Commissioner?
Not questions, but just a few observations. Joe, thank you very much for the presentation, and I think the bar graphs you've added this year are a real aid in understanding and interpreting the numbers. It is wonderful to hear and hope that it comes true that we've kind of reached the program is bottoming out and hopefully going to look upward again. Because I remember when this legislation passed, I was a reporter covering county government at the time, but legislators who put it forward said the intent was to put state support of the assessment and taxation funding at 50% of total cost. And what the closest we came was in, what was it? Yeah, 2001-2, when we got almost 44%, but to see it projected to be less than 10% in the coming year is discouraging, to say the least.
Right.
That's all.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
no questions from me. Thanks for the presentation. I think
Okay.
It was really helpful.
Mhm.
And
Thank you.
so it sounds like we need to come back and approve this. So our next meeting on the calendar in front of me is 19? Okay. Is that gonna work for you, Joe, if we approve on the 19th?
That would be great. Yeah,
Alright.
that was what we were hoping for, because the applications due May 1st.
Okay,
And I know this is ahead of the regular budget cycle, but that's kind of the idea behind this, is that it actually gives the Department of Revenue a little bit of control over our A&T budgets.
Mhm.
They don't want to see us laying off appraisers. They could potentially withhold our grant dollars. I forgot to mention that earlier. I don't think that's ever happened, but the leverage is there for that reason.
so we'll come back on the 19th. Consent, okay with everybody?
Yes.
Yes, Casey?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sounds
okay,
good.
we'll come
Thank
Yeah,
back on
thanks for the
16th.
visuals as well. Great.
All right, moving on to commissioner reports. Commissioner Hall, anything you'd like to report?
Yes, this Friday, some more housing dollars coming to the county. This Friday, the Housing Stability Council, which I chair, as always, has requests to review, approve, and sign off on many project dollars. And this is for the Coast Vineyard Tiny Home Village project in Lincoln City. $1,620,000 to place 12 tiny homes for low-income rental units, with first priority being given to fire survivors who have not yet found permanent housing. And I think it's a neat partnership. You've got the Coast Vineyard Church in Lincoln City donating the land. Northwest Coastal Housing will purchase and place the homes and manage the tiny home village. And of course, these are only projections, but if all goes according to schedule, they expect to be leasing up the homes by the end of this calendar year.
Wonderful. Nice to see that.
Yeah.
get going. Yeah. Commissioner Miller, anything to report?
I have nothing to report today. Thank you.
All right. I was just gonna mention that I guess it was now 2 weeks ago. Myself, Dr. Gray from Lincoln County School District, and Beatrice Botello, who's a City of Newport City Councilor and also works for Oak City Extension, had lunch with Governor Kotek and her wife and had nice discussions about great things happening in Lincoln County. We also chatted about our application to be included in her emergency order for homelessness and why that was not accepted, which was essentially what we kind of knew already, which was our data is just sort of funky. That was her words, but had a nice discussion there, nice meeting her. And that is all I have to report at this time. Anything else from staff? Nope. Okay. Moving on to public comment. Do we have any online smart sheet to public comment? I don't think we did. Nothing. Okay. Do we have any people online that want to give public comment? If there is somebody, please raise your virtual hand. Nope. Okay. Do we have anyone in person that wants to provide public comment? Mostly just-
Sorry, that's just great.
Oh, okay.
Are you sure, Joe? You can
Yeah.
come have your 3 minutes. Okay. All right, with that, we are going to move on to our executive session. So are we coming back into?
It's likely.
We are likely coming back into regular session after that. So we're gonna do like a 2-3 minute recess just to clear the room. And then we're meeting under ORS 192.660 regarding real property transactions. All right, thank
Okay.
you, everybody.
So
Thank you.
stay tuned on most of these stations.
Yeah.
handle.
Ken or Christina, could you just go see if anyone's sitting outside the door and wave them in if they are?
Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, we are back in regular open session for the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners, and I believe we have a motion to make. Commissioner Miller.
Yes, I would move that we approve the purchase of 224 North Yodel Lane, Otis.
Okay, do you need to say the purchase price?
Oh,
Or-
at a purchase price of $415,000.
I'm gonna second the motion.
Sure. And just for the record, the purpose of this, public record, the purpose of this property acquisition?
This is as part of our wildfire recovery efforts and will be in turn donated to Habitat for Humanity, who will in turn sell it back to a wildfire survivor at an affordable rate.
Thank
Wonderful.
you. Nice job.
Okay, all right, we have a
Wait.
motion. Oh,
Okay.
no, okay. Okay, we have a motion in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right, motion carries. Thank you. And now we are gonna really adjourn, and our next Board of Commissioners meeting is Wednesday, April 19th, 2023 at 10 a.m., both online and in this room. Motion is